In the pre-dawn darkness of a January morning in 2026, Marcus stood before his bathroom mirror, studying the face that had betrayed him for the last time. The soft cheeks, the uncertain eyes, the mouth that had spoken too many apologies and too few commands. This was the face of failure, of mediocrity, of a man who had allowed the world to shape him rather than shaping it in return. Today, this face would begin its transformation, or rather, its execution. The weak self is not merely an inconvenience, it is a cancer that metastasizes through every aspect of existence, poisoning decisions with doubt, contaminating actions with hesitation, and ultimately ensuring that life becomes a series of reactions rather than deliberate choices. Marcus had learned this truth the hard way, through years of missed opportunities, failed relationships, and professional stagnation that had left him at 32 with nothing but regrets and the bitter taste of what could have been. The first principle of the Machiavellian transformation is the recognition that weakness is not a character flaw to be managed but a fundamental threat to be eliminated. Unlike the self-help industry's gentle approach of accepting your flaws, the 2026 blueprint demands nothing less than complete psychological reconstruction. This is not about becoming a better version of yourself, it is about becoming an entirely different person who happens to inhabit the same body. Marcus began his transformation on a Tuesday, choosing the most mundane day of the week deliberately. Grand gestures and dramatic proclamations are the tools of the weak, who require external validation for their internal changes. True power operates in silence, building strength in the shadows before emerging fully formed. He started with his phone, deleting every contact who had ever seen him compromise his principles, every social media account that had documented his previous weakness, every digital footprint that connected him to the man he was determined to kill. The destruction of the weak self requires surgical precision in identifying and eliminating the habits, relationships, and thought patterns that have enabled mediocrity. Marcus created what he called his weakness inventory, a brutally honest catalog of every behavior, every excuse, every moment of capitulation that had brought him to this point. The list was longer than he had anticipated, filling 17 pages of small handwriting that documented a lifetime of choosing comfort over growth, acceptance over excellence, and peace over power. Each item on the list became a target for systematic elimination. The habit of checking his phone immediately upon waking replaced with 30 minutes of silent meditation where he visualized his future self destroying his current limitations. The tendency to apologize for his opinions transformed into a practice of stating his views with unwavering conviction, regardless of others' reactions. The compulsive need to explain his decisions abandoned in favor of actions that spoke with the clarity of absolute certainty. The process of self-destruction is not merely behavioral, it is fundamentally psychological. Marcus began studying himself with the same dispassionate analysis he might apply to a laboratory specimen. He identified the core fears that had shaped his personality, the fear of rejection that had made him agreeable, the fear of failure that had made him cautious, the fear of standing out that had made him invisible. These fears had created a personality structure designed for survival in a world that no longer existed, if it ever had. Modern weakness is particularly insidious because it masquerades as virtue. The culture of 2026 celebrates emotional availability, collaboration, and empathy, all qualities that, while useful in specific contexts, become deadly when they define one's entire approach to life. Marcus recognized that his previous attempts at self-improvement had failed precisely because they had tried to build upon the foundation of weakness rather than demolishing it entirely. The weak self manifests in language first and foremost. Marcus began monitoring every word he spoke, identifying the subtle ways his vocabulary revealed his psychological submission. Words like maybe, perhaps, and I think disappeared from his speech, replaced by declarative statements that brooked no argument. When colleagues asked for his opinion, he no longer prefaced his responses with disclaimers about his potential wrongness. Instead, he spoke with the authority of a man who had done his research and reached his conclusions. This linguistic transformation created immediate friction in his relationships, which was precisely the point. The weak self relies on the comfort of familiar dynamics, even when those dynamics are fundamentally limiting. As Marcus began speaking with newfound authority, he discovered which relationships had been built on genuine respect and which had depended on his previous submissiveness. The latter relationships crumbled within weeks, and their destruction cleared space for connections based on mutual strength rather than his willingness to accommodate others' weaknesses. The elimination of the weak self extends beyond personal relationships into every domain of existence. Marcus transformed his physical environment, removing every object that reminded him of his previous identity. The collection of participation trophies from his youth, the books on emotional intelligence that had promised transformation through acceptance, the comfortable clothes that had enabled his complacency, all were donated or discarded. His apartment became a temple to his future self, furnished only with items that supported his transformation into something harder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. Physical transformation accompanied psychological reconstruction. Marcus had always carried himself with the posture of a man seeking approval, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes downcast, movements tentative and apologetic. He began practicing what he termed predator posture, standing with his spine perfectly straight, shoulders back, eyes fixed directly ahead with the unwavering gaze of a man who had never questioned his right to occupy space. He walked with longer strides, spoke with a lower voice, and maintained eye contact until others looked away first. The weak self's greatest weapon is rationalization, the ability to transform cowardice into prudence, surrender into wisdom, and failure into learning experiences. Marcus became ruthlessly vigilant against his mind's attempts to preserve the old patterns through intellectual justification. When he felt the urge to retreat from a challenging situation, he forced himself forward. When he wanted to compromise on his standards, he doubled down instead. When his emotions counseled patience and understanding, he chose swift, decisive action. This internal revolution required new sources of guidance and inspiration. Marcus abandoned the contemporary literature of personal development with its emphasis on balance and self-acceptance, turning instead to the classical texts of power and strategy. He studied Sun Tzu's understanding of positioning and timing, Miyamoto Musashi's integration of martial and mental discipline, and, above all, Niccolò Machiavelli's clear-eyed analysis of how power actually operates in the world. These men had understood what the modern era had forgotten, that effectiveness requires the willingness to be misunderstood, disliked, and feared. The weak self dies hard, fighting for its survival with every psychological trick developed over years of comfortable mediocrity. Marcus experienced what he came to recognize as weakness withdrawal, moments of intense anxiety when his new behaviors felt foreign and dangerous. His old personality would reassert itself in moments of stress, attempting to revert to familiar patterns of people-pleasing and conflict avoidance. These episodes became opportunities for strengthening rather than reasons for retreat. Each victory over his weaker impulses built momentum for the next challenge. When his supervisor attempted to assign him a project that would have consumed his weekend without additional compensation, Marcus's old self would have accepted with a smile and a promise to do his best. Instead, he calmly explained that his weekend time was reserved for his own priorities and suggested alternative timelines that respected his boundaries. The supervisor's surprise at this newfound backbone was the first indication that the transformation was working. The death of the weak self is not a metaphor, it is a literal psychological event that requires funeral rites and burial ceremonies. Marcus created a ritual for this purpose, writing a detailed obituary for the man he had been. "Here lies Marcus the Agreeable," he wrote, "who died of chronic accommodation and terminal niceness. He will not be missed." He burned the obituary in his fireplace, watching the smoke carry away the last vestiges of his former identity. This ceremonial death marked the beginning of his rebirth into something harder and infinitely more effective. The weak self's patterns of thought, speech, and action had been so thoroughly integrated into his identity that their removal left a temporary void, a space that demanded to be filled with something stronger, more disciplined, and utterly ruthless in its pursuit of excellence. The man who emerged from this psychological reconstruction bore the same name and inhabited the same body, but he was as different from his predecessor as a wolf is from a domesticated dog. The transformation required constant vigilance against regression. Marcus established daily practices designed to reinforce his new identity, morning affirmations that declared his superiority over his previous self, evening reviews that analyzed his performance for any signs of weakness, and weekly assessments that measured his progress toward complete psychological reconstruction. He understood that the weak self, like any defeated enemy, would attempt to reassert itself whenever his guard was lowered. By the end of his first month of transformation, Marcus had already begun to see the results of his psychological revolution. Colleagues who had previously ignored his suggestions now sought his opinions. Women who had once seen him as a reliable friend began responding to him with the wariness reserved for dangerous men. His supervisor, recognizing the change in his demeanor, began assigning him projects with greater responsibility and visibility. The world, it seemed, had been waiting for him to become the man he was always meant to be. The death of the weak self is not the end of the transformation but merely its prerequisite. Once the foundation of mediocrity has been demolished, the real work begins, the construction of a new identity built on the principles of ruthless discipline, strategic thinking, and absolute focus. This new self does not emerge naturally but must be deliberately architected according to the timeless principles that have elevated exceptional men throughout history. Part 2, The Architecture of Absolute Discipline. The construction of true discipline begins with the recognition that most people fundamentally misunderstand its nature. They view discipline as the ability to force themselves to do unpleasant things, a kind of psychological strong-arming that inevitably leads to burnout and rebellion. This misconception explains why 90% of New Year's resolutions fail within 3 months and why the fitness industry thrives on the eternal cycle of motivation and abandonment. Marcus discovered the true nature of discipline during his 4th week of transformation, when he realized that his new behaviors had begun to feel natural rather than forced. The early morning workouts that had initially required tremendous willpower now felt like an integral part of his identity. The decision to speak with authority rather than seeking approval had become his default mode of communication. The choice to prioritize his goals over others' comfort had evolved from a conscious strategy into an unconscious reflex. Absolute discipline is not about forcing yourself to do what you don't want to do, it is about restructuring your identity so completely that you naturally want to do what needs to be done. This transformation requires understanding discipline as an architectural project rather than a psychological battle. Just as a building requires a solid foundation, supportive framework, and protective exterior, true discipline demands the systematic construction of habits, systems, and environmental modifications that make excellence inevitable rather than optional. The foundation of absolute discipline rests on what Marcus termed non-negotiable minimums, basic daily practices that define the floor below which he would never allow himself to fall. These were not aspirational goals subject to motivation and circumstance but fundamental requirements for maintaining his new identity. His non-negotiables included rising at 5 a.m. regardless of his bedtime, completing 30 minutes of physical exercise before breakfast, and spending 1 hour each day studying strategic thinking through classical texts. The power of non-negotiables lies in their simplicity and inflexibility. They eliminate the decision fatigue that destroys most people's attempts at consistency by removing the option of negotiation or compromise. When circumstances made his usual gym workout impossible, Marcus performed bodyweight exercises in his hotel room. When travel disrupted his normal schedule, he maintained his 5 a.m. wake time and adapted everything else around it. When friends invited him to late-night social events, he attended or declined based solely on whether participation would compromise his non-negotiables. This rigid adherence to minimum standards created what psychologists call a cascade effect, success in one area generating momentum that naturally extends to others. Marcus found that maintaining his morning routine gave him a sense of accomplishment that colored his entire day. The physical energy from daily exercise improved his mental clarity during work. The strategic insights from his evening reading sessions enhanced his decision-making in real-time situations. The second pillar of absolute discipline is the systematic elimination of decision fatigue through the creation of automated systems. Marcus recognized that every small decision, what to wear, what to eat, how to respond to emails, depletes the mental energy required for important choices. He began designing his life to run on autopilot wherever possible, reserving his cognitive resources for moments that truly mattered. His wardrobe became a uniform: 5 identical black t-shirts, 5 pairs of dark jeans, and 2 pairs of boots for weekdays, with a single high-quality suit for formal occasions. His breakfast consisted of the same protein-rich meal every morning, prepared the night before. His gym routine followed an unchanging schedule that eliminated the need to plan workouts. His evening routine included specific times for email, reading, and preparation for the following day. These systems might appear restrictive to outside observers, but Marcus experienced them as profoundly liberating. The mental energy previously wasted on trivial choices became available for strategic thinking about his career, his relationships, and his long-term goals. He discovered that true freedom comes not from having unlimited options but from having the discipline to choose the most effective path and follow it without deviation. The third element of absolute discipline involves the strategic management of environment and social influences. Marcus understood that willpower is a finite resource that should be preserved for genuinely challenging decisions rather than wasted on resisting predictable temptations. He redesigned his physical and social environment to make good choices easier and bad choices more difficult. His apartment became a temple to productivity and focus. He removed his television and gaming console, replacing them with a library of classical texts on strategy, leadership, and power. His refrigerator contained only foods that supported his physical and mental performance. His bedroom was optimized for sleep with blackout curtains, a white noise machine, and a temperature setting that promoted deep rest. His workspace included only the tools necessary for his most important work, with all distracting devices stored in another room. More challenging was the management of his social environment. Marcus began conducting what he privately called relationship audits, evaluating each person in his life based on their contribution to his transformation rather than their historical significance or emotional appeal. Friends who consistently encouraged poor decisions or modeled mediocrity received less of his time and attention. Colleagues who demonstrated excellence and ambition became targets for deeper professional relationships. This social restructuring required what appeared to be ruthless behavior but was actually strategic compassion. Marcus recognized that maintaining relationships based on his old identity would inevitably pull him back toward his previous patterns. By gradually distancing himself from influences that supported weakness and actively seeking connections that modeled strength, he created a social environment that reinforced rather than undermined his transformation. The fourth pillar of absolute discipline is the development of what Marcus termed strategic suffering, the deliberate choice to endure discomfort in service of long-term objectives. This principle distinguishes true discipline from mere routine by requiring actions that feel genuinely difficult rather than simply habitual. Strategic suffering builds psychological resilience while demonstrating absolute commitment to transformation. Marcus implemented strategic suffering through increasingly challenging physical and mental practices. His morning routine expanded to include cold showers that shocked his system into alertness while building tolerance for discomfort. His workout regimen included exercises he genuinely disliked but that produced superior results. His professional development involved taking on assignments that pushed him beyond his comfort zone, even when safer options were available. The key to strategic suffering lies in its purposefulness. Unlike masochistic self-punishment, every uncomfortable choice served a specific objective in his overall development. The cold showers improved his discipline while enhancing his immune system and mental clarity. The challenging workouts built physical strength while proving his ability to persist through difficulty. The demanding professional assignments developed new skills while demonstrating his commitment to excellence. This practice of voluntary discomfort created what psychologists call stress inoculation, increased resilience that made normal challenges feel manageable by comparison. Marcus found that after deliberately choosing to endure controlled suffering, the ordinary stresses of daily life lost much of their power to derail his focus or compromise his decisions. The fifth element of absolute discipline involves the systematic tracking and measurement of progress across all relevant domains. Marcus understood that human psychology tends toward self-deception, allowing people to believe they are making progress when they are actually stagnating or declining. He implemented comprehensive tracking systems that provided objective data about his transformation. His daily tracking included physical metrics like weight, body fat percentage, and exercise performance, professional indicators such as project completion rates and skill development milestones, and psychological measures including mood ratings, energy levels, and adherence to his non-negotiables. Weekly reviews analyzed patterns and trends, identifying areas of improvement and potential problems before they became serious obstacles. This data-driven approach to self-development eliminated the emotional volatility that destroys most people's long-term consistency. When Marcus felt discouraged about his progress, the numbers provided objective evidence of his improvement. When he felt overconfident about his achievements, the data revealed areas still requiring attention. The metrics became a compass that kept him oriented toward his goals regardless of temporary emotional fluctuations. The sixth pillar of absolute discipline is the cultivation of what Marcus called productive paranoia, a heightened awareness of threats to his transformation combined with proactive measures to address them before they could cause damage. This involved both external vigilance against circumstances that might derail his progress and internal monitoring of psychological patterns that could lead to regression. External threats included social pressures to return to his old behaviors, professional demands that might compromise his principles, and circumstances that could disrupt his carefully constructed systems. Marcus developed contingency plans for each category of threat, including scripts for handling social pressure, strategies for managing professional challenges without sacrificing his standards, and backup systems for maintaining his routines during travel or unexpected events. Internal threats proved more subtle but equally dangerous. Marcus learned to recognize the early warning signs of his old personality attempting to reassert itself, moments of seeking approval, impulses to avoid difficult conversations, or temptations to compromise his standards for short-term comfort. He created immediate response protocols for these psychological threats, including specific affirmations to reinforce his new identity and predetermined actions to demonstrate his commitment to transformation. The development of absolute discipline requires understanding that motivation is unreliable while systems are permanent. Marcus structured his transformation around systems that would function effectively regardless of his emotional state or external circumstances. His morning routine provided structure during chaotic periods. His tracking systems maintained awareness during busy times. His social environment offered support during moments of doubt. These systems became self-reinforcing as their effectiveness became apparent. Each successful day built evidence that his new identity was real rather than aspirational. Each challenge overcome through disciplined action strengthened his confidence in his transformed capabilities. Each temptation resisted through systematic preparation demonstrated the superior power of planning over impulse. By the end of his second month of transformation, Marcus had constructed a life architecture that made excellence feel natural rather than forced. His disciplined behaviors had become so integrated into his identity that their absence would have felt abnormal. He had successfully transformed discipline from an external imposition into an internal necessity, creating a foundation upon which he could build the final element of his transformation, absolute focus. The architecture of absolute discipline provides the stable platform from which to launch the most sophisticated aspect of psychological reconstruction, the development of focus so intense and strategic that it becomes a weapon capable of cutting through any obstacle between a man and his objectives. This focus is not mere concentration but a fundamental reorientation of consciousness toward power, effectiveness, and the relentless pursuit of dominance in every domain that matters. Part 3, The Weapon of Absolute Focus. Focus, as understood by most people in 2026, is a diluted concept, the ability to concentrate on a single task for an extended period while ignoring distractions. This elementary definition explains why productivity experts recommend meditation apps and noise-canceling headphones, treating focus as a problem of environmental management rather than psychological transformation. Such approaches produce marginal improvements in concentration while failing to address the fundamental issue: most people have never learned what deserves their attention in the first place. Marcus discovered the true nature of focus during his third month of transformation when he realized that his previous life had been characterized not by scattered attention but by scattered objectives. He had pursued career advancement while maintaining extensive social relationships, while developing hobbies, while staying informed about current events, while managing his health, while seeking entertainment. This diffusion of energy had created the illusion of a rich, well-rounded life while actually ensuring mediocrity in every domain. Absolute focus begins with the recognition that attention is the most valuable resource in human existence, more precious than time, money, or even physical health. Unlike these other resources, attention cannot be stored for future use or recovered once wasted. Every moment of consciousness directed toward trivial concerns is a moment unavailable for the pursuit of genuine power and achievement. This understanding transforms focus from a productivity technique into a strategic weapon that must be wielded with surgical precision. The first principle of absolute focus is the establishment of what Marcus termed focus hierarchies, a ruthless ranking of life domains based on their contribution to long-term power and fulfillment. Most people treat all their interests as equally valid, leading to the democratic distribution of attention that guarantees weakness across all areas. The focused man recognizes that some objectives matter infinitely more than others and deserves correspondingly more of his consciousness. Marcus created his own focus hierarchy through a process of brutal honesty about his ultimate objectives. At the top of his hierarchy stood professional excellence, specifically his goal of becoming an indispensable leader within his organization and industry. This objective received 60% of his discretionary attention and energy. Below this came physical development, accounting for 20% of his focus. Personal relationships that served his transformation claimed another 15%. Everything else, entertainment, current events, casual social activities, competed for the remaining 5% of his attention. This hierarchy eliminated the exhausting process of constantly choosing where to direct his energy. When faced with competing demands on his time, Marcus simply consulted his hierarchy and allocated his attention accordingly. When colleagues invited him to lengthy social lunches, he declined unless the participants could contribute to his professional development. When friends suggested weekend activities that offered only entertainment value, he participated only if his weekly professional and physical goals had been exceeded. The second element of absolute focus involves the systematic elimination of what Marcus called attention leaks, activities, relationships, and thought patterns that drain consciousness without producing proportional returns. Modern life is structured to create thousands of these micro-distractions, each seeming harmless individually but collectively devastating to sustained focus. Marcus began identifying his attention leaks through careful observation of his daily patterns. Social media consumed far more of his consciousness than he had realized, with brief check-ins extending into prolonged scrolling sessions that left him informed about the breakfast choices of distant acquaintances but distracted from his own objectives. News consumption created a similar drain, with constant updates about political developments and cultural controversies that had no bearing on his ability to achieve his goals. Email presented a more sophisticated challenge, as professional communication was necessary, but the constant stream of messages created a pattern of reactive rather than proactive attention. Marcus implemented what he called communication batching, checking and responding to emails at 3 predetermined times each day rather than continuously monitoring his inbox. This simple change recovered approximately 90 minutes of daily focus time while actually improving his response quality through concentrated attention. The elimination of attention leaks extended beyond digital distractions to include social and psychological patterns that fragmented his consciousness. Marcus recognized that his previous habit of maintaining casual relationships with numerous acquaintances created ongoing mental overhead as he tracked social obligations, remembered personal details, and managed competing social commitments. He began systematically reducing his social circle to include only relationships that actively supported his transformation or provided genuine value. This social focusing required what appeared to be callous behavior but was actually strategic clarity about the purpose of human relationships. Marcus maintained warm, supportive connections with individuals who shared his commitment to excellence, demonstrated valuable skills or knowledge, or provided access to opportunities for advancement. Relationships based purely on historical accident or entertainment value received minimal investment of time and emotional energy. The third pillar of absolute focus is the development of what Marcus termed outcome obsession, a psychological orientation that evaluates every activity based on its contribution to clearly defined objectives rather than its intrinsic pleasure or social acceptability. This represents a fundamental shift from process-oriented to results-oriented thinking, measuring the value of time investment by its production of tangible advancement rather than its immediate satisfaction. Marcus restructured his approach to professional development around outcome obsession, identifying the specific skills, relationships, and accomplishments that would position him for rapid advancement within his organization. Instead of attending every available training session or networking event, he selectively participated in activities that would demonstrably enhance his reputation or capabilities. He began volunteering for high-visibility projects that matched his skill development objectives, even when they required additional hours and responsibility. This outcome-focused approach extended to his physical development, where he abandoned activities that felt good but produced limited results in favor of training methods that efficiently built strength, endurance, and physical presence. His workout routine eliminated exercises that provided psychological satisfaction without meaningful physiological adaptation. His nutrition plan prioritized foods that optimized energy and cognitive function over those that offered momentary pleasure. Even his leisure activities became subject to outcome analysis. Marcus stopped reading fiction unless it provided strategic insights applicable to his transformation. He eliminated television and movies that offered only entertainment value, replacing them with documentaries and educational content that expanded his knowledge in relevant domains. He approached every social activity with the question of whether participation would advance his objectives or merely consume his time. The fourth element of absolute focus involves the cultivation of strategic tunnel vision, the deliberate narrowing of awareness to exclude irrelevant information while maintaining acute sensitivity to factors that impact primary objectives. This requires developing the ability to function effectively in a complex world while remaining psychologically impervious to distractions that don't serve the focused life. Marcus began practicing strategic tunnel vision by systematically reducing his consumption of information that didn't directly relate to his focus hierarchy. He unsubscribed from news sources, social media feeds, and email lists that provided updates on topics outside his areas of concentration. He stopped participating in conversations about politics, entertainment, or other subjects that had no bearing on his professional development or personal transformation. This information diet initially created anxiety as Marcus worried about becoming uninformed or socially disconnected. However, he discovered that most of what he had considered staying informed was actually passive consumption of irrelevant information that created the illusion of knowledge without producing actionable insights. By narrowing his information intake to sources directly relevant to his objectives, he actually became more knowledgeable about subjects that mattered while freeing tremendous mental bandwidth for deeper thinking and planning. The development of strategic tunnel vision also required learning to function effectively in social situations while maintaining psychological separation from concerns that didn't serve his purposes. Marcus practiced the skill of appearing engaged in conversations about trivial topics while internally processing more important matters. He developed the ability to participate in group discussions without becoming emotionally invested in outcomes that didn't affect his objectives. The fifth pillar of absolute focus is the establishment of what Marcus called deep work sanctuaries, physical and temporal spaces specifically designed for sustained concentration on high-impact activities. These sanctuaries are protected from interruption and optimized for the kind of intensive mental work that produces exponential rather than linear results. Marcus created his primary deep work sanctuary in a corner of his apartment that contained only the tools necessary for his most important professional projects. The space included a high-quality desk, ergonomic chair, and computer optimized for performance, with all potential distractions removed or disabled. His phone remained in another room during deep work sessions. Internet access was limited to sites necessary for his current project. Even background noise was carefully controlled through noise-canceling headphones that played specially designed audio for enhanced concentration. The temporal aspect of his sanctuaries proved equally important. Marcus identified his periods of peak mental energy and reserved them exclusively for his most challenging and important work. His morning hours from 6 to 9 a.m. became sacred time for strategic thinking and project advancement. During these hours, he refused all interruptions short of genuine emergencies and structured his most demanding cognitive work to take advantage of his fresh mental energy. These deep work sessions produced results that justified their protective measures. Marcus found that 3 hours of uninterrupted focus on important projects accomplished more than entire days of fragmented attention spread across multiple tasks. The quality of his work improved dramatically as sustained concentration allowed him to develop ideas more thoroughly and solve problems more creatively. The sixth element of absolute focus involves the development of attention discipline, the ability to direct consciousness with the same precision that a sniper directs his weapon. This requires training the mind to ignore compelling distractions and maintain concentration on chosen objectives regardless of emotional impulses or environmental pressures. Marcus practiced attention discipline through increasingly challenging exercises designed to strengthen his capacity for sustained focus. He began with simple meditation practices that required maintaining awareness of his breath while ignoring intrusive thoughts. As his concentration improved, he progressed to more demanding practices such as maintaining focus on complex professional problems for extended periods without allowing his mind to drift to easier or more pleasant topics. The most advanced form of attention discipline involved what Marcus called hostile environment focus, maintaining concentration on important objectives while surrounded by deliberate distractions. He practiced working on critical projects in noisy environments, maintaining his morning routine while traveling, and pursuing long-term goals despite social pressure to abandon them. These exercises built psychological resilience while demonstrating that focus is a choice rather than a circumstance. This training in attention discipline created what Marcus recognized as a genuine competitive advantage in professional and personal situations. While others struggled to maintain concentration during lengthy meetings or challenging projects, he could sustain focus for hours without fatigue. While colleagues became distracted by office drama or corporate politics, he remained oriented toward objectives that actually advanced his career. The seventh pillar of absolute focus is the systematic creation of focus feedback loops, measurement and adjustment systems that continuously improve the quality and effectiveness of concentrated attention. These loops prevent the gradual degradation of focus that occurs when attention becomes habitual rather than intentional. Marcus implemented focus feedback loops through daily and weekly reviews that analyzed the effectiveness of his concentration. Each evening, he evaluated how successfully he had maintained focus on his most important objectives, identifying specific moments when his attention had wandered and the factors that had caused these lapses. He tracked the correlation between different variables: sleep quality, exercise timing, nutrition choices, environmental factors, and his ability to sustain concentration. Weekly reviews analyzed broader patterns in his focus effectiveness, identifying trends and opportunities for improvement. Marcus discovered that his concentration was significantly stronger when he exercised before beginning mental work, leading him to restructure his morning routine accordingly. He found that certain types of social interactions drained his focus for hours afterward, prompting him to schedule such interactions for times when deep concentration wasn't required. These feedback loops created continuous improvement in his ability to direct and sustain attention. Each week brought refinements to his systems and deeper understanding of the factors that supported or undermined his focus. The quality of his concentration became a source of genuine pride as he developed capabilities that distinguished him from colleagues who remained subject to every distraction and impulse. The culmination of absolute focus is the achievement of what Marcus termed flow dominance, the ability to enter and maintain states of optimal performance at will rather than waiting for favorable circumstances to align. This represents the transformation of focus from a reactive capability into a proactive weapon that can be deployed whenever maximum effectiveness is required. Flow dominance requires understanding that optimal performance states are not accidents but reproducible psychological conditions that can be systematically created through proper preparation and technique. Marcus studied the characteristics of his most productive and satisfying work sessions, identifying the common factors that preceded these peak performance periods. He discovered that flow states were most likely when he began work with complete clarity about his objectives, possessed the necessary skills for the challenge at hand, and operated in an environment free from interruptions. Armed with this knowledge, Marcus began deliberately creating these conditions whenever important work demanded his best performance. The systematic cultivation of flow dominance transformed Marcus's relationship with challenging projects from anxiety-producing ordeals into anticipated opportunities for peak performance. He learned to view difficult assignments as chances to demonstrate his focus mastery rather than tests of his adequacy. This psychological shift enhanced his reputation as a reliable performer who actually improved under pressure rather than deteriorating. By the end of his third month of transformation, Marcus had developed focus capabilities that functioned as genuine competitive advantages in every domain of his life. His ability to sustain concentration on important objectives while ignoring irrelevant distractions enabled him to accomplish more in a single focused hour than most people achieved in an entire day of scattered effort. His colleagues began seeking his involvement in critical projects, recognizing his unusual capacity for sustained excellence under pressure. The combination of eliminated weakness, absolute discipline, and strategic focus had created something genuinely dangerous, a man whose every action served his long-term objectives, whose every choice advanced his position, and whose every day brought measurable progress toward complete dominance over his circumstances. Marcus had become the man he was always capable of being but had never possessed the clarity and courage to become. The transformation was complete, but the application was just beginning. The weak man who had awakened that January morning no longer existed except as a cautionary memory. In his place stood someone harder, clearer, and infinitely more capable of imposing his will upon a world that had previously imposed its will upon him. The student phase of his development was finished, the master phase was about to begin. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, because he has eliminated the vulnerabilities that made destruction possible. He has become something that cannot be broken because he has already broken everything within himself that was breakable, keeping only what was truly strong. This is the ultimate achievement of the Machiavellian transformation, the creation of a human being who is genuinely unconquerable because he has conquered himself completely. The 2026 Machiavellian blueprint represents more than personal transformation, it is the systematic creation of human beings capable of excellence in an age of mediocrity. Those who implement its principles will discover that the world has been waiting for their emergence, ready to yield to the focused power of individuals who understand that true strength comes not from defeating others but from the complete mastery of oneself.